Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good night. Welcome to another daily vlog. And I'm here in an area somewhat public. Maybe some people will go around here, so I'm kind of forcing myself to record here. Today's vlog is all about nostalgia and how this somewhat could be utilized for your daily vlogs as topics. So what I wanted to talk about is this feeling of nostalgia that probably all of us have had over the last few years, where people kind of were saying, oh, back then everything was better and I kind of miss the old days or miss some of the old movies, for example, music and stuff like that, right? And it's understandable with everything that has been going on. I feel like it started when COVID hit, where people were kind of saying that, and I was the same. Then it continued with something like Star Wars, for example, where Star Wars was so terrible and people were kind of being very nostalgic about the old Star Wars films. And please excuse when I sometimes look at the monitor. I'm not looking at the monitor at myself, but rather to see if someone in the back is coming around the corner. So use it as a mirror to kind of see, oh, if someone's coming, let's kind of try hide away the camera. Anyways, but I have been doing the same, and I just wanted to explain that. I feel like it's not necessarily about saying everything was better back then. As a matter of fact, it wasn't better. I was born in the 80s, and I was basically one of the only Asian kids in my city, not that many, and racism was actually really huge back then, or at least still somewhat, in air quotes, acceptable. And just to be fair, racism did not only come from, in air quotes, white people, but I also knew or have experienced a lot of racism from Turkish people. I don't know why it was or why it sometimes happens, but some people that are also person of colors really didn't like or still don't really like Asian people. I have no idea why that is. Anyways, I experienced that, so I can definitely say back then it wasn't all that great. And personally speaking, I also had a lot of issues. I was bullied. I wasn't great at school. My parents didn't have a lot of money. Actually, we lost our house when I was younger, lost it to the bank. So yeah, truth be told, it wasn't that great back then. However, I feel like when I personally talk about back then everything was better, I am actually referring to the feeling of everything being a little bit easier, lightweight, not having that much impact on me or my life. And don't get me wrong, I'm saying this with huge air quotes because I suffered burnout twice when I was younger. I will definitely talk about that in the future. But because I feel like burnout and working yourself over too much and grinding too much is an issue nowadays, and I will definitely talk about that in a future vlog. But again, I'm not saying everything was lighter, but I feel like nowadays I'm kind of, as you were able to tell in my last couple of vlogs, I'm having a lot of issues and a lot of grown-up responsibilities, having to deal with grown-up issues, grown-up responsibilities is weighing so heavily on my shoulders that I sometimes feel when I was younger, it was easier. It was easier to kind of move away. For example, I was always living in an apartment with a couple of people. So I had roommates. So I felt like if I would have had some money issues or money problems, I wouldn't be that much alone with it because there are at least two people who could, although it would have been a shitty move, I wouldn't have been right on the streets because I could ask him, hey, could you cover my share of the rent for a month? Never did that, but just the thought alone made it a little bit more easier. Or job responsibilities. I felt like I wasn't at the point where I had so much to lose that I was able to kind of switch around or do a secondary job as a bartender or whatever it might have been. So it felt easier. Another example is, for example, movies. The Marvel movie Endgame, for example, Infinity War, is a really good example of how, in air quotes, movies have become a little bit more complicated. I feel like that the villain in those films, Thanos, he had a very understandable motivation for being evil. I don't say that was a good explanation or justification for him to be evil, to destroy half of the universe, but you felt like, oh, I can see where you are coming from, which makes movies better. Don't get me wrong, it makes it better, it makes it much more interesting, but it also makes it more complicated and it challenges you. Or where nowadays movies end with a really negative outcome at the end because they want to challenge you to think. And while that is totally, it is great, it makes movies better, I feel like back then having a very simple path on, okay, this is the bad guy, this is the jock, this is the geek who at some point gets the girl and stuff like that, that makes movies less complicated, more shallow, and probably not as great for you, but it made it easier to kind of escape everything that is going on around you in terms of, oh, everything is shitty. Nowadays, you really need to think hard about, okay, am I really going to watch that movie that challenges my thought process and makes me feel bad about myself? And again, that is great. That is a really important way to kind of think about entertainment. It shouldn't be all that shallow. But sometimes when everything is kind of very heavy on your shoulders, you sometimes want to escape. And that is basically why I sometimes think about that back then everything was better. And again, it's not that the times were better, but I feel like my personal life was a little bit easier to kind of bear and to kind of get away from everything that is negative in my life. Now, where brings this us in this YouTube game? First and foremost, as you were able to tell now, I just talked about what came into my mind and what kind of is going through my head. And that's the first thing that I wanted to kind of communicate. Use these vlogs, these daily vlogs, YouTube. It's about you. Use it to kind of document whatever you're thinking about. And I'm pretty sure someone will really like what you're talking about. Second, that could be an inspiration for you. Nostalgia. Talk about something in your life that you have been enjoying, that you still enjoy, that you are missing. And yeah, bring some personality into your videos by telling us about what you are nostalgic about, what you have been doing as a kid, for example, what you're passionate about, and what you're missing nowadays. And maybe that sparks the inspiration to think about, oh, when I was younger, I was, I don't know, playing badminton a lot. Why am I not doing this anymore? So you know what I mean? It could be something that you reminisce about, but then sparks the passion to do it again. So maybe talk about that, and I hope that gives you some inspiration what you could talk about in your next daily vlog. And yeah, with that out of the way, if you want to see my last vlog, check out the video up here. YouTube thinks that you like the video down here. Don't forget to subscribe by clicking the button up here, and someone is coming, therefore I'm going to quit the video. Thank you very much.